Hello. Oh, we have a visitor. We have a visitor. Want to say hi? Mm. Um, um. Okay. Um, so I've been meaning to do a video for a while about what a parent's responsibilities to their child skating is. This is a topic that is covered uh, occasionally at clinics by coaches, by section members, and it's something that many coaches they give kind of unconscious or tertiary thoughts to, but don't really focus on. But two of the main problems that coaches face are parents who fail to live up to their responsibilities, which I'll go into later, which is frustrating, or parents who overstep their responsibilities and basically interfere in their child's skating in areas where they shouldn't be interfering. And obviously, I don't know which of those two is worse. They're both frustrating, and they both tend to be the majority of complaints coaches have about parents and skating. Probably the worst parent is the one who does both. Doesn't look after their own responsibilities, but still tries to uh, take control of responsibilities that aren't theirs. I don't. I've been wanting to make this video for about 10 years, but my information on it is, I've been coaching 25 years, so you'd think I'd have a pretty solid idea of what those responsibilities should be. Um, but I don't, for some reason, I don't really consider myself an expert on it, or I haven't done enough organization of thoughts to really process it and present it properly. But luckily for me, there are coaches that have made part of their clinics a meeting with parents where they outline these things as well. I know of three such meetings that I'm kind of drawing on to fill in the blanks here. One was done by the Newfoundland section while I was there, and a lot of what they talked about was with parents was nutrition, at-home fitness, stuff like that. The problem with this is section members are volunteers. They're not skating experts. They're not sport experts. And from my understanding, in living through the aftermath of that meeting, is that it was a very poor idea for the section to do that, or maybe not a poor idea to do it, but poor execution on behalf of the section. There was a lot of misinformation given, again, because they weren't nutritionists either. They got into specifics that were actually incorrect, from what I understand. I was not there for the lecture. I don't even know if it was a lecture. It might have been a lecture the year. No, I think it wasn't one of the years I was there, like the second or third year I was there. But for some reason, I wasn't. I didn't know the lecture was happening. I didn't know who was giving it. I didn't know the content. Anyway. And the other two lectures I know of is I have heard Manon Perron cover this topic, and I know that Doug Lee used to give a parent meeting at every clinic he used to do for several years. I don't know if he does it now, but he used to do it as a regular part of his national tours. And for those who aren't aware, Manon Perron and Doug Lee are they both coached Olympic medalists, silver medalists. And Doug Lee has coached, I'm going to say, 20 international medalists, world medalists, or 20 world medals under his belt. Maybe not by 20 different people. The section has also, I know, had meetings with board members to discuss the board members' responsibilities, and the board is almost all parents. So that kind of coexists and overlaps with some of the parent responsibilities, but we're not really covering that. I'm not by any means an expert of what the board's responsibilities are, although probably about as much an expert as on this. I was going to start with an anecdote, but I think I should do the basic. No, let's end with the anecdote. I have one particular anecdote that demonstrates some of this. So I know in Doug Lee, I didn't attend any of the Doug Lee parent lectures. I don't know anything about it, but I was told by I think 3 different coaches what the contents of that lecture was. Now it was I think it was a 1 or 2 hour meeting where there was questions and answers and everything. But basically, he outlined the parents' responsibilities as basically 2 things, and only 2 things: get your parents or get your kids to skating on time, and pay the bills. That's it. That's your only 2 responsibilities. Otherwise, you're to butt out of everything. And I thought about that for a little while. It seemed a little off to me, and I contemplated as to why for a while. And again, this is all second-hand information, third-hand information. Might be third-hand. Might be going from Doug to the parents, and the parents to their coaches, coaches to me. So this might be somewhat distorted. And the last time I heard of him doing one of these lectures was like 15 years ago, so I don't know if he still does it. But it is what do you call it? A popular myth that is still, I still hear now and then, echoes of now and then around the coaching community. And the other factor in Doug Lee saying that is Doug Lee coaches international athletes, national athletes, people who have made it a decision in their life to pursue skating as a career, basically, after high school. He generally teaches adults, people, 16 to 26 years old, who are focusing basically all their efforts, all their life on skating, which is definitely a different dynamic between coach and skater, coach and parent, than parent and skater, than leading up to that stage, or more small time. But anyway, let's assume that we're going with those 2 things. Get your kids to their skating event, their skating, I want to say practices, activities? Let's say activities, because this could be off ice as well, and pay the bills on time. Now, I'm going to argue there's at least 2 more on that. There's one more that's necessary, and that comes before those 2, which is choose your coach. Choose the right coach, because again, with Doug Lee, if you're not comfortable only doing those 2 things, you shouldn't be hiring him as a coach, and you should know some of the capabilities and talents and qualities of the coach you're hiring. And if you're unhappy with those qualities and you feel like you have to do more than show up to the rink and pay the bills, then maybe you're with the wrong coach and you need to switch coaches. Occasionally I've had parents tell me how to coach, which not very often, luckily. But I've always found it hilarious because these are generally people who have no figure skating background, no sport background, no sports psychology background, no child psychology background. They're using their expertise as parents to try to tell me how to coach figure skating, which is completely a disjointed idea on their part. So I'd say the first thing you have to add to those 2 things is you have to decide what coach to hire. And if the coach you're hiring if you feel like you have to constantly interfere with the job, with the functionality, with the of the coach you're hiring, of the efficiency, the productivity of the coach you're hiring, then maybe you need to switch coaches. Now, I understand in a lot of places in Canada there are limited options, and there may be 3 or 4 options that are all flawed, and you have to kind of go with the one that you feel is the least flawed. But nevertheless, now, I think there's a 4th responsibility too for parents, which I haven't heard any lecturer or coach or person giving a clinic mention, and I think that's support, moral support, psychological support, mental support. I think a child, a skater, certainly when they're younger, but even when they get up into their early teens and late teens, I think the parents have to, offer encouragement and moral support, and maybe a kick in the ass now and then too, but that's even a form of support to their child. And you'd think, well, most parents would automatically support their kids, and that is not actually the case. I've met a lot of mothers, a large percentage of mothers who support their kids in figure skating, but many of the fathers stay away from the rink, don't come to competitions, don't come to test days, don't. I've never heard them say or do anything encouraging to their kid for skating. It seems to be, I'd say, well below 50% the support of fathers, and it's really nice when I see at least minimal support from both the mother and the father. And I have had a few students where I've had support from neither the mother or the father to the kid. I mean, everybody knows the parent that's constantly critical and tells the kid they're not doing good enough, or not working hard enough, not accomplishing enough, not succeeding enough. That's not the parent's job. That's the coach's job. Your job is to, part of that support is also reinforcing the coach's job, the coach's guidance. So I guess that's about it for that. 10 minutes already. Jeez, I'm starting rambling terribly. I'm going to do one anecdote on a skater that I found that was or a parent that was way out of line. This is I'm going to mention their names. This is the student I taught for the longest. Her name was Shannon. I started teaching her when I believe she was 6, maybe 7. And I taught her until she must have been 6, because I taught her until she was 17 and done high school. She is the only skater that I taught from the moment I arrived in Labrador to the moment I was asked to quit my job in Labrador and move to Halifax by the Bedford Club. I taught her for the entire 11 and a half or 10 and a half years that I was in Labrador, that I was living in Labrador. And this is a really interesting, maybe this isn't exactly relevant, but her mother, Shelley, was, for the first couple of years, the example she had from other parents was that she should interfere in every aspect of skating. She should hover around the rinks, around the boards. She should constantly be talking to me and asking me questions and questioning me and telling me how to do things and telling me what language I should use with her daughter and all this stuff. And I'm not saying she did all this, but this was the example that I walked into when I went to Labrador. Extremely controlling, opinionated parents. And that's what the environment she was kind of brought up on as a parent. And for a couple years, I wouldn't say that it got worse or that she was by any means the worst, but she was noticeably interfering with my ability to develop her daughter's skating, her daughter's talent. And this came to a head. There's a better word for that. Apotheosis? I don't know. This came to an explosive level, one down private ice, when I believe Shannon was 8, but I could, maybe 9. She was around that. Her mother had asked for private ice in one of the rinks, in the Labrador City rink. And it was just me and Shannon on the ice, I believe, for an hour. I think it was to work on a new solo. And the mother had developed this habit of coaching her daughter off the board. So she would yell at her corrections at her, yell at her to keep her arms up and her head up, yell at her to do various things, which is definitely out of bounds for parents. They should not be having anything to do with technique, on ice technique. Sort of. I've had parents do it somewhat constructively, but mostly it's unconstructive and destructive. So we had private ice. I think there might have been 2 kids on the ice and 2 parents upstairs, but it's not relevant. I only need to talk about Shannon and Shelley. So the way this rink worked is were stands up one side, cement walls on the other 3 sides, and there was what would I say, the music box or the announcer's box or whatever you call it was up at the top layer of seats, the entrance level to the rink, which was way, way up. I'm going to say 15 rows of seats up. And the parents that came in usually, at that point, I think the only way we had to play music was without going through a lot of effort, was playing CDs upstairs in the the stereo in that music box, announcer's box, whatever you want to call it. So I would have on private ice that the parents would sit in the box and play music up there. So she was kind of overlooking us by 15 and significantly far away. And there was a point where Shannon did her solo, and I don't remember the exact circumstances, but me and Shannon were sitting in the middle of the ice, and the mother had kind of been jibing comments down at Shannon during her solo. Oh, get your arms up, push, get your head up, whatever. And after the solo, me and Shannon were standing in the middle of the ice, and we were facing each other, and I was giving her instruction. I was saying, okay, here's what worked in the solo, here's what didn't work. We need to do a little bit with this section. We need to make this section more blah, blah, blah. And it was very basic information. As I said, she was probably preliminary junior bronze at the time. And the mother was continually yelling during me talking to her daughter. Shelley was upstairs yelling instructions at Shannon during my lesson. And I don't know what happened, but at one point she yelled really loud some instruction at Shannon that completely interrupted what I was saying in my train of thought. And me and Shannon were both kind of talking back and forth, and we both stopped. We turned to the mother and stared at her for I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds. And the mother kind of, I believe she actually did this. Oh, I shouldn't have been yelling there or something. She covered her mouth and looked kind of embarrassed and didn't say anything the rest of that session. And from that session on, I've been teaching her for maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. From that session on, Shelley kind of removed herself from her daughter's skating. She stopped coming to the rink. She used to come to the rink every day and watch and comment and sit with parents. She stopped coming to the rink certainly every day. But I don't even think every day, every week she came to the rink. She started coming to the rink once a month, once or twice a month. I don't think she ever again after that day yelled down at her daughter on the ice. I don't think she gave her instruction off the ice. I think she still continued to encourage her with other things like stretching off ice and stuff like that, warm-ups and cool-downs. But there was this marked change in her approach to her daughter's skating and my coaching. I think, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I have the impression from her reaction and her immediate change in behavior that she, had been getting a little bit more involved, a little bit more, let's call it psycho involvement, which again was kind of the norm in Labrador at the time, so she wasn't outside the norm as far as other parents' behavior. But I think that day she realized, I'm not helping here. I'm actually interfering in the coaching process. I'm making it more difficult for David to do his job. And she, and her daughter, Shannon, to her credit, was also kind of mad with her mother or yelling at her. So, or felt it was unnecessary. And so there was a whole split there in attitude, which I thought was really interesting. But there are many parents who never have that moment of self-reflection or realization or catharsis. I taught Shannon for about 8 years after that, and it went way better than the previous 2 years had gone. There was I'm not going to say she accelerated much better than she did beforehand. It was probably about the same, but the stress levels and the interference levels and the complexity levels of trying to get information through to her past the parent was much easier. The communication between me and the skater was much easier, much more direct, much more efficient. Anyway, so that's it. So basically, I'm saying that you can get into all kinds of alternate subtleties of parents' responsibilities, but in essence, the only 3 things that parents have to do are choose a coach, which in some clubs you don't even get that choice, I guess. Many clubs. In fact, due to social pressures and manipulations, many parents think they have a choice, but they actually don't. They're actually kind of shepherded to a certain coach or a certain area. It's very common in Nova Scotia. Get your kid to all their skating activities on time. Pay all your bills on time. I don't know why that's in there, but I guess that is a responsibility of the parents. It's distinctly a responsibility of the parents. I still think it's vital that you give some support to your kid. It doesn't mean showing up to the rink all the time, but it means providing moral and emotional support, at least at home. I wouldn't know about that, but all right, this video is way too long, and probably accomplished nothing of what I wanted to accomplish.